we can really get precision at a golf course level. So I think the opportunity for precision agronomy is really accelerating.
Because a lot of those conversations are happening in rooms where golf is not in the room. So we need to get in the room. To get in the room, we need to have the data.
We're driving our resource consumption down. Why are we consuming those resources in the first place? To drive up the maximum environmental and social benefit. It's a net positive equation that golf has.
Well, welcome everyone to this special edition of Changing the Business of Golf. We're at the Golf Business Technology Conference in Belfast, and we've all been speaking this morning. And the subject was golf's sustainable future, people, planet and profit. And if you like, that's kind of a simple definition of sustainability. We're going to break this conversation up into 3 bite-sized chunks. We're going to talk about good, difficult and different, what the golf industry is doing well in terms of sustainability, where we face challenges, and also what we're going to be doing differently perhaps now and in the future, and particularly with an emphasis on technology and innovation. So for the benefit of everyone watching, let me just introduce the panel. We've got Gina Rizzi from the Radius Sports Group. Welcome, Gina. Now, you advise organisations and golf businesses on sustainability. You're very welcome. Good to see you. Simon Elsworth, Head of Professional Solutions at Syngenta, and also the founder of Operation Pollinator, a programme that runs across golf and agriculture. And also Jonathan Smith for the GEO Foundation for Sustainable Golf. You're all very, very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's start with the good. Let's talk about the things that golf is doing really well in terms of sustainability. Gina, tell us about what you do in the United States, particularly around best management practices. Tell us what they are and why they're proving successful and useful.
Yeah, so best management practices, or BMPs for short, as we call them, involve agronomic practices across anywhere from 12 to 14 different areas. And they could be promoting water conservation, energy conservation, cultural practices, integrated pest management, nutrient management. There are a whole range of practices that golf courses are looking at a facility level in the United States, which is really good. On the heels of all states in the U.S. hitting a goal of 100% of the states having state BMP guides back in 2020. And since 2020, an effort has been made for facilities to adopt BMPs to their own facility level, so that it's customized based on their climate, their soils, the area that they are in.
So it becomes a kind of individual blueprint for that club or that golf course.
Yes, it's a framework that gives kind of the minimum standards as well as the maximum standards of ways that you can care for a course, and that serve as best management practices. So that way it helps because it's a communication tool with members, with staff, with the public, with legislators, regulators. There are all sorts of ways that you can use BMPs, but primarily it is that framework for us, for operations.
And that's a key point as well, because it's not just a plan internally, but it's a way to demonstrate to the public and policymakers that the golf course is being run in a good and sustainable way.
Yes, exactly. And so the courses can use these BMP guides, facility BMP guides, print them out, share them, use excerpts from them, share them digitally. There are many ways that they can kind of activate or communicate with them.
Jonathan, turning to you, let's talk about water conservation, because whilst it's a big topic, particularly here in the UK, but all around the world where we're seeing extreme weather events, water conservation is really important. But what we're seeing is golf responding very positively, and there's lots of technology to support that as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think that's becoming a strength of golf, and it's technology. I mean, water is a huge theme for a start. It's a major dependency. It's a massive issue for golf to get on top of and adapt and transition around. And there's 2 things that I think golf can feel good about in that water space. One is knowledge, actually. I think over 20 to 30 years, golf has built really quite a strong knowledge base, not just on water, but across like a framework of sustainability-related issues. R&A, USJ, universities, really powerful knowledge base. And that exists for water stewardship, from like the macro to the micro, from catchments right down to sprinkler heads. But then if you sort of thread that in to the technology that's then available to superintendents and clubs, from TSE to grey water, where does water come from? How do we use it? plug in new renewable energy to pump and disperse that water right down to those sprinkler heads that deliver precision irrigation. You've got a good blend, I think, in the industry, and something that we can feel proud about the knowledge base combined with the technology. There are questions about what to do next in terms of showcasing how knowledge and technology can come together as a whole. And there's questions about the accessibility of knowledge. It still lives in some hidden spaces. So how can that be brought forward more strongly? We're working on a knowledge centre, a sustainable golf knowledge centre at the minute, which is really a signposting site for a lot of it, scientific and guidance, best practice type information out into the industry. So I'd say, that's not just water. There's other subjects like soil science where that knowledge and technology is also coming together, something the industry can be proud about. And, super bank of resources for superintendents in terms of what do I do and how do I do it.
Well, and you mentioned soil health there, and Simon, that's something that obviously Syngenta specialises in, but the digital tools that are now coming through for soil are particularly good.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think we've seen technology evolve significantly in golf over the last 20 years from all parts of the industry. They're involved in helping golf course managers produce a great product. I think what we're seeing now is digital tools that help integrate some of the technologies together more effectively, and help maybe solve some of the challenges of making decisions around complex issues, which were previously quite difficult to make.
Yeah, so these tools are powerful in the hands of the superintendent, but as you say, there's a need to bring this together as well.
Yeah, and data is one thing, but insight is another. And I think where we've seen the evolution in the last few years that's really helpful is rather than just producing tons of data, we're starting to turn that into insights, which can then be used for decision making.
So that's what golf is doing well. Let's now have a look at what golf is perhaps finding more difficult. Simon, we know from market research that golfers want good playing conditions. They want true rolling greens. They want good fairways. One of the challenges golf faces is policymakers and the way they're looking at use of regulation, particularly cracking down on golf in places, perhaps unfairly. Tell us about what's been going on, the situation in Europe in particular.
Yeah, we had a really difficult situation in Europe when the European Commission proposed to change the way that regulation worked and to implement the sustainable use regulations. And this was a major shift in policy. There was quite an extensive consultation with the agricultural lobby, but there's zero consultation with the sports turf market, and golf sits within that, obviously. And that created a real challenge because the proposal was to move from a system where we had these essential tools available to golf course managers in a highly regulated environment to a situation where everything was going to be banned. There's going to be nothing of value available anymore. And I think it highlighted a real challenge for the industry because we knew from our own work and the innovation that we brought to the market that the quantities of pesticides, for example, and the same would go for fertilizers, has reduced significantly as technology has improved. But at the golf course level, there wasn't any data to back up what was effectively seen as anecdotal stories, and to really be able to communicate effectively with policymakers, you've got to have the data to back it up. And so I think it highlighted a big gap in the industry in terms of our ability to tell our story based on data points.
And what sort of reduction have we seen in inputs?
Well, it depends on the segment, but in some areas, the quantities of product use could have reduced by 90%. So very significant in terms of the volumes of product that are applied.
And different countries are taking different approaches. So what might be happening in France or in Denmark could be very different to what's happening in Switzerland, where they're almost looking at things at canton by canton on a very, very localized level.
Yeah, and that's a kind of hangover from the Sustainable Use Regs initiative in that, Europe doesn't act as Europe. The broad regulations are the same, but countries can then choose to implement in a way which is more restrictive. And so we've seen that in France, where derogations are in place, which makes it very difficult for course managers to operate. And in Switzerland, where they're looking at canton by canton variations, which from the perspective of a company that's trying to support golf course managers and provide solutions makes it very, very difficult to manage.
Gina, what's it like in the United States? It's often said that what happens in the United States comes to UK and Europe, but perhaps in this case, the advancement of regulation here is maybe something that's coming to the United States.
Yeah, it is, and it has. A variety of different states have encountered things like that. In Colorado, we do a lot of work in Colorado, and uh, they've faced legislation around municipal pesticide use. So differences by city, which could create a lot of unintended consequences and issues when you have a golf course that falls in two cities or in the landscaping industry, if someone is treating an area in one area that is butted up to another city, you have all sorts of training and certification and things that have to happen that are different, that are would become very difficult to do business. And so that's one example in Colorado. We've also had situations like in California, just passed some legislation around the energy use and carbon emissions and reporting requirements. And also, electrification is another one that is different on a state by state level. And there's more growing legislation around changing smaller equipment to electric equipment. And the list goes on. I mean, we've had legislation around affordable housing replacing golf courses as well, in municipal areas in California, that was defeated, but most likely will come back. So it is a problem, and being able to show data, as Simon had said, is really important, and collectively. So on an individual level, of course, but also collectively as an industry and at a state level, is so important.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of land use pressure there in California, and Jonathan, we've seen that here in the UK. There was a piece in the Financial Times very recently. We're recording this in May, and just last week there was a piece in the Financial Times about paving over London's golf courses, and also another case. There was a big feature on the BBC website about a local council wishing to build on a 9-hole public course because they're trying to follow policies from central government to build more houses. This is an issue for golf, and perhaps the challenge is to kind of get together to make golf's case.
I think it is one of the most difficult things that golf faces, government relations in general, because as Gina points to, there's so many different issues that governments are accountable for, and they all seem to relate to golf. I mean, golf is economic, social, and environmental in a whole host of ways. There's hardly a sustainability issue that doesn't affect golf in some way, shape, or form because it's land and business and all the different things. So that's a lot for golf to have to gear up for. And to tackle, some of those issues individually, whether it's biodiversity protection, use planning, water regulation, pesticide regulation, energy and carbon, that's a lot. So what we've learned from Europe, I think, was fascinating on the SUR regulation. How do you build consensus, first of all, because there's lots of different perspectives on where golf should be in pesticide use. So building consensus, building tools and solutions in European golf as well now through the European Golf Association to building an integrated and connected sustainability data system. Like a interoperable data system so that we have more of the data in the future. Um, and then also knowing what needs to happen to serve at local level and, as Gina says, at national level. So we learned a lot actually about how the Dutch trajectory might be different from the Swiss with their cantons, which might be different from the Spanish. So there's how to have flexibility as well in that government relations. Um, I mean, it's complex, but it's doable. There's some fundamentals of good government relations, a strong collective narrative that's not too defensive. It's also proactive, like golf's here to work with government, good systems and tools, and then a bit of transparency and a bit of data sharing and evidence. And those things are the sort of recipe of, I think, putting golf on a much better footing on individual strands, but also more holistically when people think of what golf is and what it offers.
Gina, tell us about the situation in the United States, because I guess what Jonathan is talking about there is the need to act together. So on the one hand, talking about best management practice, a lot of that is happening, but there's perhaps even more need to gather together in kind of collective units to make the case for golf.
Yes. So I have a couple of examples on that level. So number one, from a facility level, it's important to act together. Meaning a lot of times superintendents or agronomists are the ones that are out, boots on the ground, taking care of the course, doing their BMPs and all the right things. But a general manager might not know what they're doing or fully understand what they're doing. So collectively, like at a facility level, that matters. Understanding and working with each other and collaborating. But then you kind of branch it out even further. And on a state level, it's important for an association for everybody to be working in concert. So, for example, in the state of Colorado, working to fight that legislation, all of the courses, the 222 courses coming together to say let's do our facility best management practice guides and show that we're using these frameworks toward best practices for taking care of our course and sustainable resource use. So the association, the Golf Course Superintendents Association, coming together and as a unit, it was critical. But then the next level would be bringing all of the associations within golf together as a whole within a state and also, I mean, really within a country. But in the case of New York, they've got an organization called the Empire State Golf Alliance that came together to conduct an economic and environmental impact study, determine, what is the usage around water use. Less than 0.5% of water that is used in New York is used by golf.
And that's not what people think, is it?
That
Is
is
it the
not
public thinks it
the perception.
much higher?
Way higher. Yep. So being able to figure out that data to dispel those myths is really important. And then economic impact, 12.9 billion in total economic impact. So golf is a major driver of the economy there. So this Empire State Golf Alliance is comprised of 18 different associations across the state, which range from everything from the 6 superintendents chapters to the PGA professionals, to the club managers and general managers, to the golf course owners. But basically, 18 of these organizations coming together saying, we're going to conduct this study. We're going to find out our data so that we can have worthwhile conversations and develop those relations, like Jonathan was saying, with legislators and policymakers so that they can understand what the industry is doing to drive positive impact and positive change.
Simon, how aware do you think the industry is of some of these challenges? Because that, regarding regulation or perhaps water, some of these things are kind of fundamental. How much more do we need to do, and how quickly do we need to go to get onto the front foot?
I think it was really clear when the sustainable use regs were put forward that the industry was not aware. They weren't aware of the challenge that was coming nor the impacts that it could bring. And then collectively, the industry had to get together, get up to speed, and start to position itself better as a collective rather than as individuals. I think there's still work to do building on from that. The outcome was quite positive from a ability to continue to do what you need to do and have the products available to you to produce great quality services. But there's a danger of complacency, of not thinking about what's next. And, almost inevitably, something will be put forward again at some point in the future, which may well target golf because it's a little bit of a soft target compared to agriculture. And the industry really needs to get itself ready. And that means starting now, not waiting until the 11th hour again, like the previous time.
So we're moving into what needs to change and what needs to be different, and let's talk about that next. Jonathan, we were speaking a moment ago about the pressures, land use pressures coming on golf courses, perhaps to put housing development. There are tools now, and there's geospatial mapping that can perhaps help us put values that can take the subjective nature of this debate and conversation and actually put a value on the golf course. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's right. Geospatial tools, carbon calculations, ecosystem service calculators. There are different tools, different models for calculating not just the economic value of a golf business in the community, but also that social return on investment that golf brings, and then also that environmental and ecosystem service. We are seeing some clubs and some countries further developing and prototyping those things. And at the foundation, we keep studying, researching, and prototyping and seeing when it might be ready to bring those into tools that could become more accessible. But you put those things together and you get a much stronger picture of a piece of land and a business which is really productive. That's the big question people are asking about land, is how productive is it? And people think that a housing estate or a rewilded golf course is more productive than its current form. Not sure that's the case when you look at the whole social, economic, environmental value that a golf course provides. So yeah, we've got some of those things are quite well developed. Others are in their infancy, but that will be a really important part of a golf facility telling its story with more data about the value, the whole value that it provides in its local area.
Well, and you make the point about data again, and Simon, that you kind of understanding and insight from perhaps from a hyper local level, which is now what the technology allows. That's going to be really really important to put values on golf courses.
Sure, and I think it's incredibly valuable for the course individually and for the golf industry collectively. And if you look at the macro environment that we're in, we've got increasing regulatory pressure on golf clubs, and we've also got climate change, which is impacting what sorts of pests and diseases are present at what times of the year. We're seeing invasive pests move around. We're seeing diseases that weren't a problem historically becoming a problem. And that all needs energy and data to understand what's going on. I think if you contextualize it like that, then you see a future, an agronomic future, which won't just rely on chemistry, but will be developing solutions to build the resilience of the plant, to improve its health and state, and also bringing forward biological controls and biostimulant products, which can contribute. So as you bring more different technologies into the mix, the complexities of getting it right increase. You have to consider more factors. And that's quite difficult to do even now. So if you increase the complexity without tools to support you, it will be very difficult. And this is where we see a great role for digital tools, decision support tools to work together to kind of act like a glue to help integrate those solutions as a part of an integrated pest management approach to managing the golf course. And I think if you take that data from a golf course level and aggregate it, then it becomes a great resource to use to talk to policymakers and politicians about the benefit which golf confers.
And Gina, this comes to the point you were making about golf courses working together collectively with this data, and also working with policymakers and actually becoming a trusted partner and advisor to policymakers rather than lobbyists, perhaps.
Mhm. Yeah, there's so many courses and states and associations that we're working with that are moving in that direction to be more of a trusted advisor, to have a relationship where the policymaker could call with questions about how something affects about how an invasive species, is affecting a certain area of water body, and that is unrelated to golf, or how landowners, homeowners could better take care of their lawns. There are instances where it's already happening. I mean, we have on Long Island in New York, several years ago, there was a Long Island nitrogen action plan put out by the Department of Environmental Conservation in New York. And golf initially wasn't a part of those conversations. And then through establishing relations and showing data, being persistent about that, and really earning a seat at the table, golf is now a trusted advisor. And now there's water conservation and water quality concerns again on Long Island, and the DEC is again involved. But they have included golf as one of the stakeholders on their planning committee. So, getting out in front of it and establishing those relations is so important, in order to be able to be part of the solution.
Well, and you say part of the solution, and that's the opportunity, isn't it? Because we take a state like New York, where I think you've got over 800 golf courses there, but you've got something 70% of the land is on hard surface. So golf courses are really part of the solution, and that's the message that people need to understand, because the perception of golf is still incredibly negative to those who are uninformed.
Yes, it is. And so part of the efforts like that we're doing in New York with the Empire State Golf Alliance is educating not only policymakers, but the general public as well. So being able to educate through workshops and seminars, doing field walk and talk events with the policymakers and legislators so they get to see BMPs live and up close. And then the communication that goes out to the public around those types of events is really important because that helps people see the reality of the benefits that golf courses provide, like the ecosystem services that Jonathan mentioned, anything from water filtration to cooling, those areas that have so much urban space with concrete that just makes the city hotter and more energy use. So having that green space really provides such a benefit.
And Jonathan, when we talk about ecosystem services, we're talking about how people benefit from the environment around them as well. Just tell us a little bit more about that, because that, in some ways, is the kind of the nub of presenting golf as a solution.
Yeah, I mean, it's about sort of taking the science of these things and turning it into something that's communicatable either to government, to the golfers, into communities. So, I won't go into too much detail on ecosystem services, but there are a lot of things environmentally that golf does alongside socially. And those are air quality, pollination, flood alleviation, water restoration, water quality, carbon sequestration, urban cooling. There's just a raft of them, and they are directly good for people, and they are indirectly good for communities. And the golf landscape is a center for that. So but that's the science, and I think going back to something Simon said about using technology to join things up. There's the scientific side of agronomy and ecology and water and all the sort of BMP content, and that needs to empower people in clubs to make those better decisions. But then, what communications comes out the other side of that? How do clubs feel confident and creative about talking to different audiences about what they're doing? So there's no point in doing an ecosystem service calculator if you sit with a number, but you don't know what to do with that number, how to explain and talk about that. And I think that is something, again, that would be slightly different for golf in the future at scale, more empowered clubs talking with more confidence and accuracy and authenticity into communities. That's a game changer for the sport of golf, because there's nothing that golf can't do socially, economically, or environmentally. I mean, if you were to take a plot of ground and say, we're going to pack it with recreation, we're going to create jobs, we're going to create a supply chain, which is usually quite local, and we're going to build all these ecosystem services in, plus a few other forms of recreation, what's kind of not to like about that? So science to substance would be a good thing to join up more. And there's tools and systems and frameworks and things that help do that. But I think that might be slightly different in golf's future.
And well, talking about golf's future, maybe just a final word from you all just on golf's future. And Simon, what are we going to see in terms of technology and innovation?
I think, for a number of years, we've had some decision support tools to help course managers time applications or make the right sort of intervention at the right time as part of their integrated management programs. They've tended to rely on general weather data that we would purchase, but we're now at the point where we can integrate sensors, site-specific sensors, into the algorithms to really provide hyper-local forecasts and predictions. So with sensors like the SPEO sensors under the ground or the aero sensor above the ground, we can really get precision at a golf course level rather than at an area level. So I think the opportunity for precision agronomy is really accelerating now, and that, as part of an integrated program, will be a great way for golf to tell its story.
Gina, talking about telling stories, what's the future for golf and how we tell our story in a proactive and positive way?
Yeah, so the impact studies that we do is a key factor in that because you're finding out the environmental actual data. I mean, we can tell you in New York what percent use decision support tools for making their decisions. We have actual percentages. I think it's around 70% of the courses in New York use them. So we can tell that. We can tell how much water use. We can tell so much information that it's important that we drill that down into a way that can be digested and understood by all stakeholders. And ways that we do that is through participating in events, an individual course level, I would say if you're in a state that hasn't, or in a city or province that hasn't done a study, encourage them to do a study. I'm not saying with us, just in general, do a study, learn your data, and share the data. Because if we come together and we understand that data and then share it, then we can be part of those conversations. And because a lot of those conversations are happening in rooms where golf is not in the room. So we need to get in the room. To get in the room, we need to have the data to back what we're talking about and then present it in a way that makes sense.
Jonathan, final word from you about the future and what we've just been talking about there.
Yeah, I mean, at a club level, you know, bringing sustainability in, letting it kind of live and breathe in the club, not being ashamed of it, not keeping it over here as a sort of arm's length thing, I think is pretty fundamental. And we're already seeing that trend really quite quickly in the way that superintendents, club managers, owners, even club committees are letting that kind of come in and inform their decisions. It's so relevant. And then I think that story, I mean, the story of a golf club is a bit inputs and outputs. That's another way that people talk about like the value of something. And that's quite a nice, simple way of describing we're this golf club or we are golf as a whole. We consume things and we consume the minimum amount of plant protection products and the most efficient use of water and the minimum amount of increasingly renewable energy and the minimum amount of materials with the minimum amount of waste. So we're driving our resource consumption down. Why are we consuming those resources in the first place? To drive up the maximum environmental and social benefit. It's a net positive equation that golf has. So I think future integration within clubs and a bit more into strategies and outlook at association level, and then helping clubs tell some quite simple but incredibly powerful stories of what they are in their local communities.
I think you've summed it up really well there. And I think the point is it's a net positive contribution across people, planet, and profit, which was the theme of our conversation today in Golf's Sustainable Future. So Gina, Simon, and Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.